Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to every one of you. Welcome to the Special Developers, and today's session will be handled by another colleague of mine in Nigeria by the name Emmanuel, and he's an experienced special developer and also a front end developer, and he's going to take us through Django with React. We started with Django, like the raw Django. So he is going to continue with the Django, and he will transition into React JS. Yeah, and also he is the developer behind Spatial Node. I hope most of you have seen it on LinkedIn. People are posting their. I think he is the best person to tell you more about it. So, Emmanuel, the floor is open for you to start your session.
Okay, thank you so much, Ernest. Good day, everyone. My name is Emmanuel Jolaiya. I am a geospatial software engineer, full stack. I have a background in GIS, and I love software development. So I'm like in the middle, combining software development with GIS to build solutions. And I have a lot of interest in community development and building capacities. So I'm so excited and honored to be part of this initiative by Ernest. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to give back to the community and to share the little that I know. And I hope you all would enjoy my session and have a very lovely time. All right. So before I dive into the order of the day, there's a lot when it comes to software development. A lot is involved. And if you notice the curriculum that the geospatial developers have, you will see it's kind of a progressive curriculum, right? From the basics, the web servers, the geo server, now to HTML, CSS, jQuery, JavaScript, Leaflet, and then it advanced to you guys building web maps. And I've seen a lot of issues on the GitHub repo where you all are submitting your projects. I've read the source code of some of you. I've seen the results and the output. That's the web map that some of you have built, and I'm really impressed. So, but there's more. There's more to software development. But the reason why we are doing this now is because those stuff that you've been working on before is like a prerequisite for this lesson. So it's a strategic curriculum. So we don't just want to jump into React or Django REST framework, which is what we're going to be doing now. We want you guys to have a background of what is required to be a very great engineer or a very great geospatial developers, and not just being great at it, but also building solutions, because these tools are like very powerful. They're like sword if you know how to use them very well. Once you can think of an idea like this, you would want to go ahead and build it, right? And since it's a community of experts, over 1,000 people are in this group. So if you have any idea that you think can solve problem in Africa, it's as easy as you just picking a colleague among the group and then you guys building it. Because it is only us that can build and solve the problems that we are facing locally, right? Google does not know that the government in my country is building a road next to my house, right? But I know because I live here. The same thing that is happening over there, wherever you're joining from. So we are the ones that have the first-hand information of what is happening around us. So we are like the best person to build solutions that can solve them. So knowing how to build a software is a very great start, because when you think of an idea, you can easily build it without wasting much time, right? So yeah, that's why we want to do this. More like topping it up, the awesome stuff that you've been learning before, building upon it and taking it a step further to the point where you can be able to build your ideas. So the topic for today, or the concept we want to learn today, is Django REST framework, which is more like a Django, which is still a Django project, but more like spiced up to provide REST services in the form of API. So I have a curriculum here which I would use to explain the whole concept. So it's a lot to take in. So I plan to split it into 3 days. So we do all this today. I'll try to be as fast as I can, and I'll ensure that the concept is still understandable. So I won't really rush necessarily, but I'll try to move fast because of time. So everything that is happening, or what this is about, is still Django, which you're already familiar with. But if you can recall, the concept of Django is model, views, and templates. So you have models. Let me just create a new file here, models.py. So in models, you import the models class from the Django. Then you have your class, say, to-do app. Then you put the models.model here. Then you start defining your table. Name, maybe this is going to be a string. Okay, let me just use statistical. Yeah, let's just see this is a string. I don't want to go into much details. So you want to build a to-do list. So you give the to-do list a name, which is the name of the to-do. What do you want to do? Then you can maybe give it another field like is completed, which can be a Boolean, true or false. So this is how this is like the starting point of any project you want to do in Django. You have the models. Then from the models, you go to the views. So in the views, you access the models, right?
Hello, Emmanuel. Yeah, I'm requesting that you increase your fonts. I think it's not that eligible on the screens.
Okay. Let me see if I can do that with Magnet. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can do that. It's the magnifying tool. Yeah, magnifier. So give me a minute, please. Let me be sure I don't know, is it I don't know, is it better? Oh, let me just reshare my screen. Okay. Let me just share the whole screen and see if it will work. can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so let me pull up the magnifier and put it here and see if that would help. So let me pull up VS Code. Is this better, or should I probably switch my team to maybe light mode, if that would help?
Yeah, Emmanuel, can you try this? When you go to the on the text editor, then you hold the control, and if you are using a mouse, you can use the wheel.
Yeah,
The
trying. It's not zooming in.
Okay.
So I'm using VS Code.
Yes. VS Code. Oh, okay.
Or is this better?
Yeah, I think this is better. This is better.
So actually, what I'm trying to explain is the concept of Django, which is the MVT. So this magnifying is working like, but it's not making my screen to be responsive. I'm not sure if I can still type. So yeah, let's just manage. Sorry about that. So we have the MVT, that's the architecture of Django, model view templates, MVT. So we start from the model, then we go to the views. So on the views, we use our ORM, that's the object relational mapper, to create the database. So basically the model is just like, I think it's even descriptive enough. It's a model of how you want your database schema to be structured. What do you want to store in your database? Okay, I want to store the name of my to-do, and I want to store the status if it is completed. Keep it as true. If it's not, keep it as false. Then on the views, use the ORM, which Django has built for us. You just fetch information from the database using the objects.all. You can also filter if you just want to filter all your to-dos that are completed by just writing objects.filter, and then you put is completed equals to true. So that's the views. Then on the templates, you pass the object to the HTML template, and then using Ginger, which is inbuilt as well, Django template system, you grab the information and you can do a lot of magic. You can use for loops, you can use conditionals to render those information dynamically. So that's the concept of Django. So Django is more like monolithic in a sense. So let me just put this here. So I'll share this with us anyways. So Django is monolithic. That is, everything you want to do that has to do with application can be built with Django. That is, you want to interact with the database, fine. Django has models.py for you. You want to manipulate data, okay. Django has views for you. And that's not all. You want to present the data to your users, fine. Django has template system for you, where you can write your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So Django is like monolithic. You can use it to build a full stack application, like a full stack application. But over the years, organizations are getting bigger, they are scaling, right? And then they have a lot of team working on a project, which is the joy of every business, so you can grow and scale. So when you start scaling, you start thinking of separating your software, your backend, your front end, and start putting them into separate repository or into separate storage system, such that you can have different team working on different parts of the project. So that's why there's specialization in the software engineering field, right? As a Java developer, you can decide to specialize in front end, and all you do alone will be front end. And that's what we're doing with React later on. While you can also decide to specialize with backend, and all you're going to be doing will be on the backend, which is Django. So separation of concerns start coming in. Because if there's like a code base of over 40,000 lines of code, it becomes cumbersome having all developers to work on it. Even with the introduction of version control like Git and GitHub, sending pull requests and everything, it still leads to conflict. And even aside conflict, makes it difficult to manage projects, makes it difficult to add new features, to fix bugs, to write tests. You understand? So that's why people start thinking of security concerns. And that's where we have this client-server architecture. Let me zoom out, because zooming, like using the magnifier is not making my screen to be as responsive as I want it to be.
Emmanuel, maybe on just click on Control plus plus.
Control
plus plus.
I'm doing that, it's not working. Oh, perfect, it's worked. Thank you. That's nice. Thank you so much. So I wanted to use this draw.io tool to sort of explain the concept behind APIs and stuff like that. So code base is becoming monolithic. For example, why should you even learn DRF in the first place? Because of the job opportunities, right? You can build your ideas, like I've mentioned earlier, and it's more like the logical next step for you after you're done learning Django. Because as developers, we don't stop learning. That's the right word to use. We always learn. You can never learn everything finish. So now you've learned HTML, you've learned CSS, you've learned JavaScript, you've learned Django. So it's like the logical next step for you to learn. Because if you sleep on it and you say you are done or you are okay with where you are, you miss out a lot of opportunities. So you have to keep learning. So Django REST framework, after you are done with Django, is like the logical next step for you to learn. And it's fun as well. Because you're not leaving Django, it's still the same Django, it's still the same Python you're writing. So it's just addition of some concepts, basically. And then who uses Django? So Spatial Node is heavily built on Python, Django. I think as at yesterday, over 40,000 lines of code for the back, over 11,000 lines of code for the backend. I think it's the front end that is 40,000 lines of code. Instagram as well is built on Django. Reddit's built on Django. Spotify, Eventbrite, like a lot of companies are using Django. So when they say a lot of people are using Django, they are not saying that they built their application on the monolithic Django, that is model, view, and templates. They use DRF, Django REST Framework. So DRF is the acronym for Django REST Framework. Because they are like a very large, look at Instagram, for example. If they use Django for Instagram, then how is it possible that people can use, just think about it. Then how is it possible that we have Instagram application, mobile application? Like how are they able to transform our Django application into mobile app? You see that it's not actually possible to do that. So when they say companies are using Django, of course, some use Django, like purely Django for the MVT, but most of these big companies, as they start to scale, where they start having millions of users, they start using what we call the client-server architecture, such that it separates their client from their server, that is their backend from their front end, so that it can be easier for them to add new features, to fix bugs, and not because it's not all businesses that are on the web. It's not everything that is websites. Some business are on mobile applications. Some business are on desktop applications, right? Some are even on IoT devices. Some are on even wristwatch. So to enable communication between all those devices that are in their software and their backend, where they have their database, their modules and everything, they need to use Django REST framework to expose their service, their business via an API. And then we move into an API. So what is an API? So an API is an application programming interface. So think of it as, okay, maybe I should just use this to explain the client server architecture, which is more like what happened in the World Wide Web. So think of it as you are at the restaurant, you are the client, you want to go and buy food. So when you go to the restaurant, you call the waiter, hey waiter, can I get jollof rice? So the waiter will now go to the back end where they prepare the jollof rice in their restaurant and then serve it. If it's not available, cook it fresh, then put it in the plate and then come back to you and serve it to you. So where does this connect? This is where it connects. So at that instance, you are the client. That's you. You're the client. Then the person that you reached out to is the, let me just use API here. Then let me use this because on the back end it's usually database that we have, of course, and a lot of API scripts. So the client, you request to the waiter, give me jollof rice. So the waiter will go to your backend, which is basically your Django application with all the models, views, and everything. Backend, and then database. They're usually together, backend and database. So do all the computation, then return it back to you as, yeah, this is your food. Let me give it back to this client. And then you eat and you enjoy. That's the concept of client-server architecture. And that's the concept of separating concerns. So the way they communicate is this API, Application Programming Interface. So this API has a lot of concepts. Backend generally has a lot of concepts. And one of the concepts I would like to explain is the URLs concept, or something we call endpoints or API routes. So as you advance in the backend development ecosystem, you get to understand this concept. But let me still use this diagram to explain the concept. So this URL or endpoint or API route is basically a simple URL that you will call, or so in this case it's the waiter, www.waiter.com. That's an endpoint. That's what we call endpoints. You will call this guy waiter.com. Please give me jollof rice. Waiter will go to backend. They are usually connected anyways. Go to backend, prepare everything for you, and give it back to you. So anytime you come across URLs or endpoints, endpoint is mostly used because if you're a backend developer and you are building a project for a mobile application developer, what the guy will ask you for, where is the API route or what's the endpoint? Because that's where he or she would fetch any data he or she needs to display on the application, and not just fetch or post. And then that will take us to HTTP Verbs. You know, when you were at the restaurant, what you were doing was basically saying, waiter, can you get me a jollof rice? And you know, in our elementary English now, when they say verb, the verb is an action word. So this get here is an HTTP verb. There are a lot of them, but the ones that you mostly come across is get, post, put, delete, and patch. Don't worry, I will explain what each of them mean. So when you say get is used to request for something. Everything they are request anyways, but for get, you more like fetch something. You want to collect something. Then let's still continue with the restaurant. Then for post, you can think of post as like you trying to pay for your food. That means you are giving something. or paying for your food. That's the idea of post. Then for delete, that's more like you saying you want to cancel your order. You are deleting your request. Then for patch, it's more like saying you want to edit your order. Maybe initially you said you wanted jollof rice and beans. Then you just say, hey, waiter, come here, please. I don't want this again. Make it jollof rice and just salad. That's the idea. Like, that's the basic concept. Therefore, put is more like you changing entirely your order. You know, the one of patch, you do not like cancel your order. You just said you want them to change that beans to salad or something. But with put, you want to change everything. Okay, I don't want jollof rice again. Give me just tea and bread. So you're more like doing a complete change of order. So we can call this one a partial change. So what is are HTTP verbs? So get, post, delete, patch, and put are all HTTP verbs. So that's the concept behind you having an endpoint. So when you give an endpoint to a mobile developer or a front-end developer, this is what the person will be doing to that URL, to this URL, www.twitter.com. Person just be sending get, post, delete, patch, and put request. Just think of it as like you, maybe LinkedIn or something. So on LinkedIn now, when you write a post and you click on post, this is what is being sent to the backend, post. So the backend receives it and then save it on the database. When you delete your post, this is what they send to the backend. The backend receives it and deletes your post, maybe your tweet or something. When you edit your post, this is what is being sent. When you log into LinkedIn or Twitter, this is what is being sent by LinkedIn to fetch all the trending posts for you to display on your timeline. But of course, behind all these are lots of computation, lots of tracking, analytics, lots of database operation and everything, which is what you are already familiar with that you can do in the views, in the models. But these are like the standard HTTP verbs. So HTTP is an acronym for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. I think we already know that, but let me just write it again. So all these they're like standards that created to ease the way we interact with the web and the way we share information and data across the web. So yeah, that's that. Then statelessness. So this concept, you also come across this. So the idea of this concept is that when you are establishing a connection with your backend, it should be stateless. Let me see if I can explain it with this food ordering. So let's assume this is me. When I'm requesting for stuff from the backend using this waiter, this request should be stateless in the sense that, say, when you are trying to make a similar request, the information should not clash. Of course, in our restaurants, we have, I think we only usually have a few waiters, so they mostly take orders from multiple people. But regardless, the orders never clashes. When you place your order at a restaurant, they don't give you the food of someone else or someone else's order. If of course that might have happened before, you might have experienced such awkward situation before, but it's usually rare. But that's like I think of that as the idea of statelessness. Don't clash. Like a lot of users visiting LinkedIn and a lot of people are making requests on LinkedIn using those HTTP verbs, but never clashes. You can't see someone else post on your own page. I mean, of course, it will be on your page as your timeline, but you can't edit it because it's not yours. You can't see it on your own personal. More like you can't see someone else's messages on your own message box on LinkedIn. So this might be very abstract now, but as you proceed, you'd understand it better. Then status codes. So this can also be linked to these HTTP verbs. There are a lot of status codes. The one that's usually popular is the 200, which you call OK. There is 400, which you call bad request. There is 404, which is known as not found. There is 500, server error. There is 201, created. There is 422, like there are a lot of status code. In fact, you can create your own status codes. It's these are the standards actually, but you can always create yours as well. But this is the concept. This 200 OK is more like the response your server is giving to you. So when you go and order for food at a restaurant, when the food is available, they will tell you it's available. Think of that as a 200 response. Okay, your food is available. When it's not available, or when you're making an order that is not even, so I don't want us to mix this together. We can be confused together. This 400 and 404. So 400 is like you are making a bad request. You go to a Cold Stone and you are requesting for jollof rice. That's a bad request because in Cold Stone, we all know that Cold Stone, they only sell ice cream. So you are the one at fault in the case of 400 because you're making a bad request, right? Or you're making the request in a way that they don't accept it. Say they speak English over there to place order and you are requesting for food in Spanish. They can't understand. That was a bad request. You understand? So that's the idea of 400. Then think of 404 as not found. So it's not a bad request, it's a good request, but they did not have it. So you request for, okay, they sell ice cream at Cold Stone. Okay, give me ice cream with this type of toppings. So that's a good request. But when they go to the back end, they realize that they don't have it. So they will come back to you and say, not found, 404. I think we must have seen this a lot on some websites that you visit and you see 404, page not found. So that's the idea. So sometimes this can be a bad request from you, but don't mix the two together. Then 500 is server error. Maybe you request for food and then maybe they have issues in their kitchen and they can't prepare the food for you. So they just tell you, we are experiencing a server error, we are experiencing an issue right now. Please check back in the next few minutes. So think of that as server error. So this is not your fault. This is not the fault of your API, but this is the fault of your server. So it has to be from the back end. And this is where backend developers suffer a lot because if anything happens to the server, they are at fault, even if they are not, because at the end of the day, everything is a machine. But they'll be the ones to take the large chunk of the blame. If anything, that's why sometimes if you hear that Google has crashed, Gmail has crashed, the backend devs are always sweating, ensuring that it's back up. Because it's an issue that you don't want to experience. Trust me, you don't want to experience that your server or your backend is not working anymore due to maybe a typo, or maybe it's even just a comma in your code that is causing that. So think of that as this server error. Then 200 and 201 created is more like when you place an order and they tell you that, okay, your order has been successfully placed. You know, in Domino's, how it's done in Domino's, when you place an order in Domino's, you see your name on that screen with the time that your order will be ready. So that's 201. So, okay, they have the order. Then they not just have it, they have also placed it for you. That becomes 201. Then this 423 is like more like unprocessed entity. So don't let me disturb you with that. You might not really use this, but these are the codes that you use often. 200, 400, 404, 500, and so on. So this is mostly used when you store something in your database. When you have saved something in your database, you just send 201 to the client that this has been saved on the DB. So client server architecture is just what I've explained here. The client is here, the server is here. So separating the concerns instead of just having everything on the Django monolithic application. The microservices. So this is also a concept that has been happening recently because it's more like still destructuring the whole application into smaller bits so that we can have separate teams working on it. So sometimes you wonder when someone say, I'm working at Google, I'm working at Microsoft, you think that their code base is just a single code base, but no, they have thousands of code bases. In fact, if someone says he's working at Google, he might just be working on a very small portion of Google Maps. Maybe his own work is just to write the code that renders Google Maps in vector tiles or that displays points on Google Maps, right? But at the end of the day, they are still working with Google. So the concept of microservices is the structuring your app 1, app 2, app 3. The structuring your apps into several smaller components. That's the idea of microservices. So ideally on the back end in Django, you can handle authentication system, the way people log in to your website, the way people log out and stuff like that. Let me save this as authentication system. Also in Django, you can have scheduling, like you can send emails to people. All these emails you used to receive, all these newsletters and everything, they are mostly automated, so you can do automated emails. You can do the normal API itself, CRUD. So that reminds me, let me explain this concept. So CRUD is just like an acronym for create, update, and delete. Create, update, and delete. So you also come across this. So this is the acronym of CRUD, which is more like get is for create is for post is create, delete is still delete, update is patch or put. So get is not there unfortunately, but that's the acronym of CRUD. So yeah, you have your normal CRUD where people can create stuff on your DB and stuff like that. So ideally, all these three can happen in a Django application. Django is that powerful. I mean, even in most backends, all this can happen. But the idea of microservices is separating it such that instead of having all your teammates work on a single Django code base, you separate it such that you have a single application for authentication. So here they use some auth system like OAuth 1. Don't worry, I won't explain this because it's might be too advanced, but you might want to Google it out anyways. So this is what this stuff does. It's a server on its own. Maybe they deploy it on Heroku or somewhere. That's what it does. Just send a request to this one. Maybe instead of beta.com, this one can be www.com/authentication. That's what this one does. Just send a request to this one, maybe a post or a GET request with the appropriate information, and it's going to return back to you what you need. So think of this as some website that you go to and you say you want to sign in with Google or sign up with Google. What you are doing at that point, you are not interfacing with the whole of Google code base. Google has a separate code base for purely authentication. That's what it does. So when all these websites as you are visiting that is telling us to sign up with Google, what they just do is they hit Google endpoints with your Gmail, and Google will see their request, process it, and then return to them your email, which you have used to sign up on Google before, maybe your first name, your last name, or maybe your profile picture. And then they use that one to log you into the application. So that's just what this is doing. And this is a code base on its own, and it can have millions of lines of code as well. So they can have like thousands of engineers working on this. The automated email. So what happens now when you sign in with Google? That's the first thing. In fact, any suspicious attempts that someone used to sign into your Google account, Google will surely send you email that we noticed someone has signed up and this and this and this. So that email system is not in a single code base. Google has a separate code base as well for email scheduling and automation. Like once this one is done with authentication, this one will just call another endpoint, which is more like another URL. Let's say www.twitter.com/emails. So this one we just, after getting that normal request or previous request, just send it to this one. Okay, you just got the request. So this is what we got the request. In fact, sometimes you see the IP address and everything. And what this one will now do is get that information and send the email to you. So this can exist in, like, it can be divided into as many as you want. So you can have separate systems for doing separate things. And these are things that happens when you start scaling and you start growing. You have, instead of the normal way, which is the way you start, which is having everything in a single place, you start having it separate and organized. So I think this usually happens when we probably paying for something, where you queue to get something in the, maybe we can think of this as a buffet. When we are at a restaurant or at an event where there's a buffet, there's always a queue. So when you're on the queue, the first thing you do is to maybe pick the starters, maybe some fruits. After you're done with the fruits, you get passed to the next stage, maybe to pick the food. After that, you get passed to the next stage to pick the waters, and sometimes you terminate at the stage in between if you're not interested in the next stage. So that's the idea. Instead of having a single bowl where we have all the foods, they separate it. They put fruits in a place, they put snacks in a particular section, they put drinks in a particular section, so that you reach out to the ones you need anytime you like. So that's the idea of microservices. I really hope this explanation I'm using makes it easy for you to understand. So all these things happen. So this is like the concept, which is REST, and that's where this name comes from, Django REST framework. So Django REST framework is a library actually that is making it easy for us to create a REST API from Django. And REST is representative state transfer, which is the concept of this API, allowing you to communicate between the client and the server via an API. So they are like standards, and they have different rules. For example, this is one of the rules: use appropriate status code. This is one: use appropriate HTTP verbs like get, post, delete, and patch. Then another rule that they have is when you are creating your endpoints, always use them in plural, in the sense that if you have an endpoint that does blog, myendpoint.com. So if you have a route that does blog, make it explicit and in plural. Sorry about that. That is blogs. So then let this be the verb: get, post, delete, and patch. In the sense that if a user wants to create a blog, instead of having an endpoint that will say create blog, this is not the REST standard. The REST standard is to have it as blogs, and then let these verbs determine what you want to do with this endpoint. If you want to create something, just send a post request to this endpoint, and then you'll get your stuff created. If you want to fetch all your blogs, just send a get request. If you want to delete, send a delete request. Or maybe with the ID of the blog. You want to patch. So that's just the idea of REST, more like standards around creating APIs. Then we have webhooks. So these webhooks are like, they're also APIs, but their own work is just to listen. Anyways, in a way, all APIs are listening to requests, but webhook is quite kind of special. So I use this a lot in payment system. Most payment infrastructures, if you have integrated a payment system before on the back end, you use this. You know, all these applications that you use that you pay with your card details. Most times they use Stripe, Flutterwave, PayPal, and stuff to handle the payment. So what happens is when the payment is completed, those infrastructure, that is those SaaS platform, those fintech, they send a post request to your webhook, or it gets request to your webhook with the information that just happened. That is your name, you that you made the payment, your card details, and so many other information about the payment that just happened. So you will just have an endpoint like a webhook that is always waiting for those payment systems to send a request. So once it receives a request, then you just perform your business logic. And then you do any analytics or any computation or any script you want to do, and then update the DB that, okay, this person just made a payment and this person can now be opting for Pro or monthly subscription or something. Because ideally, those payment systems, they don't have access to the database of the app you're using or the website you're using. They are just, their own is just to handle payments. But the way they send the request such that the app you're using can know that you have made your payment successfully is via webhook. So they send the request to this webhook listens and then update the DB of the app you're using. Then the app you're using will now unlock Pro version for you or monthly subscription or something. So it's still an API anyways, but that's just what it does. So I just used the term here, business logic. So you also come across this. This is just more like normal business. This is more like, usually when we write script or when we write code, we just write code for writing code's sake. But when you're working on a business project, you write code with the business logic in mind, in the sense that if you don't want a particular person to have access to some features, you just write the code to do that, basically. So that's what business logic means. Okay, I don't want this user to have access to this page. Just like LinkedIn, if you're not a premium user, you can't have access to premium features. So you are still accessing the same code base that LinkedIn is using for other users that are in premium. It's just that you are not permitted because of the business logic that is there. So it's until you make Pro payments and then they receive webhook from Stripe or PayPal, depending on the one LinkedIn is using, and then they run their scripts to update their database. That's why immediately you pay. Maybe in like a second or two, you see that you now have access to premium. Or even any other platform you use, you have access to Pro or to the business service. So that's the idea of webhooks. This was usually used with payments, and not just payments, even with the Roku. The Roku uses webhook as well. You might be wondering, when you push your code to GitHub, how does Roku know that you have made a push to GitHub for it to deploy it for you automatically? Or even Netlify, or a lot of services use webhook. So they use this a lot to always wait and listen to requests from external service before they perform an action. Okay, then I'm talking about server. So server is, I think you should already understand this. You might already know this. Server is just a computer somewhere sitting on the cloud or even on-prem where you deploy your code. So the server is not actually your code. It's just where your code is sitting. Sorry about that. So yeah, so that's the concept of server. They're actually computers as well, but they are not just. You can actually turn your computer to a server, so far you have access to constant electricity, and the bandwidth of the system is very fast. Yeah, you can host your website, your API, and everything on your system. So that's why we use cloud nowadays, like Roku, because they have data centers where they have a lot of computers. So what we just do is we push our code to those systems, and our code will sit there, just like the way they sit on our computer. And then they give us the IP address of that computer, which they mostly use to map to a domain name where people can now access our API or our websites. So people use those platforms because it's reliable. They have 24/7 electricity. They usually have low downtime, and they have data centers, and it's also protected. It's secured. So they are still computers. Everything is computer. So that's what server is. That's where we install our codes. So keep it up and running and online 24/7. Then we have staging. So this is like an environment. So this is like a place where you test your code before you push it to production. And then we have production. This is what the user sees, interacts with. So this is where you test your features or API. So if you develop a website, an API or something, you don't push it to production immediately. It can lead to a lot of bugs. That's why you hear all these guys saying that we have been testing this feature for like a month now, and we are finally happy to release it to you. So you might be wondering, where are they testing it from? It's usually from their staging environment. So google.com has another URL, which we don't know of, which is also google.com, or which has the same features as google.com, but that's just where they test it. So all companies have this. They usually review this outside. Usually some random URL, www.stagingxyz blah 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 .google.com. So that URL is the same thing as what is on google.com, but it's their staging environment where they test any new feature they want to release. So when they see that everything is working fine, then they deploy it to the actual google.com, which we, the end users, now see and enjoy the features. Then we have Cicd. So Cicd is continuous integration, continuous development. So this is a concept that you also get exposed to as you proceed. So this is more like, it can be a script, it can be a platform that makes it easy for you to push your code to staging, run all your tests, and also makes it easy for you to deploy your code to production without really doing much stuff. So example of platforms like that does this are Circle CI. We have GitHub Actions. So this one, like, a lot of them actually. GitLab as well as their own. So they are usually scripts actually, such that when you push your code to your repository, they check through your code and they help you to deploy it on Heroku. So you won't really need to be interfacing with Heroku every time. And not even Heroku alone, AWS, DigitalOcean, etc. So this is what mostly DevOps does. But as a developer, backend developer, you also you need to know you need to have an idea of what is happening in DevOps, because you have the capacity to switch between the two roles actually. Because as a backend developer, you should know how to deploy your application. So, and once you start looking at deploying application, you're already entering DevOps slowly. This is not part of the concept of this training, but I just feel it's good we know it in case we've come across it online or in case we want to learn more about it. So the H in GitHub is capital. Then logging and monitoring. So this is just a way of, usually when we are developing in Python, we usually print, so we can know where the error is coming from. But in production, you can't print in production. So you usually use logging to more like monitor how your API is performing. When someone makes a particular request, you log it. X person makes this kind of request. Y person has made this request, you log it. So this is just what happens when you place an order at a restaurant. they usually log the order that this person has placed an order, and this was the cashier when the person placed the order. This person placed this order at a particular time, at a particular date. Those kind of information, they log it so that if anything happens, they just go to the login or the monitoring dashboard, and then they just filter by dates. Okay, on the 1st of October, how many requests did you receive? X requests. And then they see which one is faulty or which one has bugs. And this is what they use when you report something to most of these platforms. For example, if you send a support request to, say, PayPal, maybe you use PayPal for something, and then it's giving you a bug. So when you send a request to PayPal that, hey, PayPal, I made a payment to my friend and he has not received it, why is that happening? Ideally, PayPal logs all requests. So what they just probably ask you is that, what's the transaction ID? So what they just do on your end is just search their monitoring dashboard and see what actually happened. Was the payment successful? Was the payment declined? They will see everything, and then they will respond to you that we have checked on our end. This is what happened, blah, 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 blah. So logging and monitoring makes it easy for you to know where and what is happening in your application. Because when you deploy an application, you can't actually monitor it on the server. Like, you can't be there anymore. So you're putting your trust in your application that my API, my script, and everything is going to work fine. So the only way you can get some information and insight into what is actually happening is by you setting up logging and monitoring. Okay, that's a lot of concepts. So before I proceed to actual DRF, I really want to know if any of us has a question so far. And because the next steps are quite practical. So does anyone have a question so far before I proceed? Can anyone hear me at all? Oh my God, hope I'm not speaking to myself.
You can continue after the whole thing. They can jot the questions down after your presentation. They can ask the questions because we are recording the session. Yeah. So after the presentation, then they come in with the questions.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I want to see if I can open my let me just open a new. So I'll open a new terminal. No, this is not what I want to do. No, this is it. I want to split this. Why is that all coming up? Anyways, okay. So let me just make a directory here. Okay. Okay. I should also open this. Okay. Let me just do this. So why is this not? Is it because I'm sharing the screen? I can't open my terminal. So let me show us the official website for the DRF because that's where the magic happens. So it's important to know what's happening. Django. So this is actually what you want to do first when you want to learn anything new. You need to check the official documentation. So when you type Django REST framework on Google, this is what you see. So this is the official doc of Django REST framework, and you will spend a lot of time here, I can assure you, because no matter what you want to learn, everything is here. And these are some companies that are funding Django REST framework. So Django REST framework requirement is from Python 3.6 and Django 2.2. But I believe all of us would probably have the latest Django, so you shouldn't have issues with that. But it's good to know the requirements. So this is how you install Django REST framework. Let me copy that. I really don't like why this okay, so I of course I have Django. I must have I've installed that already globally, but I really wish I know. But let me just assume I believe we all have Django installed since we've gone through the Django training anyway. So yeah, I believe we all have Django installed. But I'm assuming we also know what virtual environments are. So in case you don't know what virtual environments are, they are just like a way of creating like an isolated environment for a project. That's why we notice I have a lot of projects I'm working on with different versions of Python, but they don't clash because they're in different virtual environments. So that's what I want to do now, to create a virtual environment. So what I use is, I use pipenv. So let me just open that real quick. So pipenv, there are a lot of them. There's pipenv, there's poetry. I used poetry for some projects as well. But pipenv, the pipenv is just like a virtual environment manager and package manager that you use to create a virtual environment for any project you want to work on, and for also installing packages, because Django REST framework, all of them are packages at the end of the day. They are all Python packages or modules. So with virtual environment, you can manage them and have a folder with all the packages that you are using for your project without it disturbing another project on your computer with separate package. So that what I typed there was pipenv shell, which is to launch like a virtual environment in this folder. So now I install Django. So ideally, if you want to install Django, you use pip install Django. But because I'm using pipenv for my virtual environment, so I use pipenv install Django. So this Django now will be the latest because I did not specify a version. And this Django is the latest, which is 4.1. And it's not going to tamper with the other Django version that I've already installed since last year for special node API. So you see why virtual environments are cool. So if by next year I want to work on a new project and I create a virtual environment and install Django, it's going to install the latest one for me as at then as well. And it's not going to tamper with this current Django that I'm installing now. So that's the idea of virtual environment. They kind of make it easy to work on different projects with different package versions and without them clashing. So this pipenv, there's poetry. Poetry is even more interesting. I've been using poetry lately. So when you're searching for poetry, always add Python to it. Let me see if I can increase this. So you can see Python packaging and dependency management made easy. So poetry is very easy. If you want to install a package, just say poetry add package name. Yeah, I'm using ppm install Django. It's just with poetry add Django. So all these tools are just to make our developments easier, and so yeah, that's by the way. So because Django REST framework requires Django, as we can see here, under the requirements is Django. So that's why I'm installing Django. I have Django installed in a different project, but I'm just trying to walk us through how it looks like when you want to start a new project that is API focused. So Django is very large. I don't know why it's taking time. So after Django, then we install the Django REST framework. Thankfully, I'm on VS Code, so if this is taking time, I can just split this screen and install DRF on a second. DRF. So ppm install Django REST framework. Okay, so I think Django is installed now. Let me try by typing Django. Django admin. Interesting. Let me try this. Okay, let me activate my virtual environment in case it happens. Okay, so DRF is installed as well. Perfect. So the initial step is to create a Django project, and that's by using our Django command, which I don't know why it's not working right now. But let me try it again. Django is DG, right? Django. Let me see that I have Django version and confirm. Django, because I just perfect. Here you can see this, the latest version, 1.2.2. So that's it. So let's try again. Django admin start project API. So API is like the folder or the name of the project. So let's see if that will work. Okay, so yeah. So I was like, there was no hyphen before. So I guess that's why it was not working. But yeah, the hyphen is very important when you're starting the Django project. So yeah, we have the API folder. So let me just open my code in this folder so that I can close this one so that we can be able to navigate the files on this side panel. Okay, so this is the Django project. So by default, you have the module, you have the manage.py and everything. So this is what happens when you create a Django project. This is like the bare bone. So which is very good. So I don't like this duplicate API. I don't usually like it. So let me delete it and create it again. So there's a trick that I use if you want to create a project without it creating like a new folder or something. Is by using API then full stop. That is the name of the project and then the folder. So this folder is like the current folder. put all the Django files in the current folder. So if I expand this now, you'll see everything is in this folder. So I don't have another API subfolder again, as you can see. So that's just to avoid redundancy, having a folder, then having another API folder as well. It's redundant. So now that we have our Django project, which is like the starting point, you can also inspect this. That's the project, but that's not the app. So the logical next step is to create a Python app, and that will be, now that we have access to our manage.py, so that one we just use manage.py and not Django admin again. So Django manage.py start app. Then you can call it to do, because I think the easiest project to work with when it comes to creating API is a to-do application or a blog application. It can be anything. I think it's just easier for us to use it to do so. So when you're done with that, you see the application here. The folder for migrations, which is the query that interface with the database. The admin.py, which is the user interface that comes with Django. Very interesting UI. And then the app itself, which is where you configure the application. The models, which is where you put all your database models. The test, which is where you write your tests. And then the views, which is where you write your views, your logics that interface with the templates in form of context, or your APIs if you're interfacing with the outside world. So that's the logical first step. So now we have Django. As usual, I just want to check if everything is working fine. By running Python manage.py run server. Just if you want to check if everything is working fine, so you can see if everything is fine. So let me follow this link. So you can see we have Django installation working successfully, Django 4.1, which is cool. So that's just pure Django, like it hasn't changed. So this is where you now start integrating DRF. So DRF is a module, and you know how Django deals with module, deals with them in form of applications, right? So the logical first step you want to do to integrate Django REST framework in your existing Django project or even a new project is to go to settings.py and include it under your installed apps right here. So you can put a comment here and say external applications, because this is an external application. These are the defaults that comes with Django. This is the admin. This is what is powering the admin, the admin UI. This UI, admin, this one. This is the app that is powering it. So there are a lot of apps that is in Django. But for DRF, we need to add it. And this is where we add it. All these things I'm saying are on the code base, because when you are lost, you can always come here. So as you can see, add REST framework to your installed apps. So let me just copy this. But I like typing, because the more you type, the more it sticks to you, because you're typing it yourself. Although it's really stressful, but the more you type, the more you understand what's happening. Sometimes you make typo, and the more typo you make, and the more you're able to fix it, the more it sticks, and the more easier it is for you to write code. And most times you even don't make such mistake again, because you would have learned from the previous. So yeah, we have DRF. So that's the logical first step, REST framework. So now this has all REST framework capabilities in our Django app. Like that's the starting point. So what's left now is for us to start making use of it. So, earlier I went to this URL /admin, and earlier I taught us about API routes, endpoints, and everything. This is just the same thing. Just switch this to www.waithouse.com/admin, and then you have this. So, but this is where the client interacts with our application. And in Django, as you're already aware, we do all that in the URLs. That's why if you go to the URLs in the project, you see that the admin has been defined already. That's why we can be able to go to admin. If I click on not existing routes, you'll see this, that the page not found. And you can see 404, and this was why I taught us earlier that 404 is not that is a bad request. It's just that the server cannot find it. I cannot find it. And sometimes it's usually a bad request. But instead of the server throwing a 500 error, to just tell you that, okay, thanks for requesting for this food, but unfortunately, we don't have it in our restaurant. That's why you have page not found for you. So let's go back to this documentation. So REST framework ships with a lot of APIs. It has the login and logout API, which you can also add using this URL. But I don't think we are interested in that because we are not building an authentication system. Then it has permission as well. There's actually a lot to REST framework, a lot to it. But let me make it easier for us. So usually the first thing you want to do when you're working on any application is to add it to the URL path. So that's somewhat easy. I'm assuming you already know this. You import the include from the Django.urls, and then you include the routes, so sudo, and then you include sudo.url. So what this is doing is that it's creating a route sudo, and this route, if you hit this route, Django will now go to your to-do application, which is this, and look for urls.py. It should be URLs, and then check for the URL that match any request you made to this to-do, and then return the response accordingly. So let me create a normal view that we're probably familiar with. Render. Yeah, let me just create the to-do. Oh my god, what's that sound? Is it time already? Okay. So yeah, we need to create a URL that's PY. So the rest, the Django apps, when you create a Django app, it only returns, like it only give you admin app, models, test, and views. But you need to create URLs yourself, right? And when you create a URL yourself, you define something like this. So this is like the top level URLs for the project. That's this API project. When you have a lot of apps, this is where you define the route for them. You understand? So let me import the same thing. Import paths. The URL patterns. So now, when you create paths, can the person mute his mic? Someone is causing me. Hello? Okay. So I want us to see the reason why we are creating something. So let me just go back to repeat this in case the noise has caused you guys to miss me. So, what is this? No, this is where it should be. So when you create a Django project, again, the first thing you do is to go to the settings, which is the one here. to add the REST framework under the installed apps. So immediately you've done this, you have access to all the REST framework tools any way you want to use it in your Django application. So now you want to start creating an API. And what's an API? How do you access an API? It's from a URL, right? Like you're able to access this admin from a URL. So let me just let me comment that. So you're able to access this admin page from a URL. So that means anything you want to build, you start from the URL. So we want a URL for to do. Okay, fine. You come here and create the path. I'm using include here because I want to include all the URLs in this application I created, to do application. I can decide to do it just like this as well, using normal path, but that will lead to a lot of relative imports, trying to import what I have here. So I'll start doing from to do, which is this applications, this application.url imports X and Y. So that's like, can lead to a lot of relative imports and confusion as well. So what is recommended is to have a top level URL here with a name, and then include all the URLs that are in this to-do folder, this urls.py. Anything inside these URL patterns will be included here in this top level. So include is also like a function from this Django.url. So after path, just put command and import include, and then put your to-do.urls, which is this file, to do this package .urls, this file. So now when you come to this to do .urls, then you can now do the same thing that is here. You can now start defining this path to expose the application. So URL pattern is a constant thing that must be in all URLs. If it does not exist, to throw an error. Let me just cancel it and you see. It's going to throw an error. URL pattern is very important. You can see. Having a pattern in it. So let me return it back, and you see that there won't be any error again. So yeah, let's just create a basic endpoint. So this endpoint now, so this path is slash. So what slash path means is like the base URL. That is what you have here to do. You someone visit todo.com 120.0 this is route /to-do, and this Django receives it from here, and then see that you don't have any routes here, but you are providing it list of URLs in your to-do application. Django will go ahead to enter this application, which is this to-do, and then go to the URLs file, and then check for all the paths that you've provided here, and start matching it from the top. So this will be the first that is going to match. So if you see that there's a match here, so now look at the view that will process the request. And this is where we start entering Django REST framework. So every path function requires a view that will determine the response that will be sent to the client in form of API. You understand? So we need to put a view here, otherwise there will be error. So that means we need to go and write a view in our views.py. So let's just write a simple view. Let me just get you guys this so you can see. It's a simple view. Let me just use this. I don't want to use something that is very complex at all. And I want to ensure it's something that is simple as well. I think we should just create as. So the views here are pretty complex. Not complex, but they're out of context. So let's just import views from the REST framework library. So REST framework provides us a lot of classes, super classes actually, that we can use to create our views. And if you want to import anything from the REST framework, you import it from REST Django. No, from REST. Where is this? Why is it not showing suggestions? Anyways, so Django, ideally, when you create views in Django, we use this render to render our templates, you know, create, to do, API, and then we return, render, and then provide the HTML template and the context, right? But this now we are not returning the templates, we are returning API views. And this is like one of the features that Django provided for us. So in an API for to-do application, we need our to-do application to be able to create a to-do. You'll see the all links together now. Update a to-do and delete a to-do. And if you create this API now, in a way, you might need to interact with a database to do all this. So that means we need to set up a database. We can't avoid that. So I don't know, are we familiar with setting up database? I don't know if, because I'm planning to set up a Postgres database and I don't want to, I'm not sure if it's going to be very like complex or strange to us. But anyways, let me just show us, let me just assume there's a database somewhere. Let me just use this. Let's just say to do is a list, cook food, write book, etc. So this is our to-do database. It does this and this. So what this one does now is, okay, this one should be from .views. So Django REST framework has a class. So I'll change this to class actually. Class to do. Let me just say all to do lists. And I inherit this. I believe we don't know what inheritance is anyways. So when you inherit from this API, so API view is a class from Django REST framework views, right? And when you inherit this API view, you have access to a lot of functions, a lot of methods, like a lot of them that you can use to manipulate your database and return response to the users. And when you are returning a response, it's usually in JSON formats, which is more or less like a dictionary. This is how a JSON format looks like: a dictionary of key and value. So let's create a simple to-do list. So this API view has a lot of methods because we are trying to inherit it now. It has the get method, it has a post, it has delete, basically all those CRUD stuff that I explained to us, and it has the list. So if you want to return all to-do list to the front end, we can override that method. What's popping? Ernest, is my time up or something? I've been seeing some messages since.
Oh, we can do some 10 minutes and we can wrap up. Then maybe God willing, Monday we can continue. I think, I don't know if it is okay with those of us on the call. If you don't mind, we can just do the full 2 hours. I'm thinking maybe some of us will be exhausted. But Imano,
Yeah,
you're the instructor, so just
yeah,
flow going.
it's a lot of concept to digest. So I'm trying as much as possible not to make it too complex. But I don't know. So I think we can probably just um maybe since it's 10 minutes, maybe we can already start Q&A. According to the calendar, we have kind of touched this. Okay, so JSON is what I just talked about now. So this is like the language we use to communicate. We use JSON to communicate, and then setting it up is what I've done. I've installed Django REST framework. It's as easy as that. And then this is what I'm doing right now. And I plan to show us the browsable interface of Django REST framework, so you can see how to how to interact with DRF. So ideally, the idea of DRF is to actually convert, like where this JSON is coming in is like what DRF is mostly used for actually is to convert modules or Django objects to JSON. So I was trying to do it here in the sense that DRF introduced something that is known as serializers. I initially didn't want to talk about that because I think it might be too much to discuss right now, but I think it's fine. So after you create your urls.py, you also need to create a serializer.py. So this urls.py is the entry point, obviously, and then the views is where you write all the logic and stuff. Then this serializer, what it does is it transforms your models right here. Let me create a simple model. Class to do. As usual, you inherit from the models.model. And then let's say the name of the to do. Okay, let's see the ID. Models dot let's say UID field. So I love using his UID a lot, but for the sake of simplicity, let me just use integer field. Integer field. So the ID of the to-do, ID1, so and 3. Then the name of the to-do or the item itself, that's what you want to do. So they can use that one as a string, which is models.char field. They are by default, this field usually requires you to put a max length. So we say the maximum length that a to-do must provide is a to-do list should not be more than 100 characters, right? So yeah, I think that we can make do with this. A to-do with this and this. So when you are done with this to-do application, then you register it in your admin, which is like the easy thing to do. You import it from here, from your models, import to do. Then you do admin.site.register. I know you're already familiar with this. So this will make it show on the admin panel. So what Serializer does is to convert this to-do ID item into a JSON object that can be sent to the front end, because ideally you can't send this to the front end. Never. You can't send it to the front end. But with the help of serializers, you can serialize this model in a JSON way, but you can now send to the front end. And how do you serialize? It's as easy as importing serializers from the Django REST framework or library. And the serializers are in the REST framework.serializers module. So let's import from REST framework, import serializers. So they are usually class to do. So you give it a name to do serializer. Then serializers.model serializer. So this is like the easiest serializer you can use. So this guy, we ask you for a meta class, and in that meta class, you provide your model. That okay, which model do you want to serialize? Your to-do model, which you also import from your to-do.models. Then it will ask you which fields you want to release to the front end from this to-do model. Then you decide, okay, I want to release the ID and the item. So you provide it here, ID and the item. So there are a lot of other fields. You can have exclude, you can do a lot of cool stuff here. But I'm just trying to move fast. So this is the concept of serializers. So this guy now is now what you will use in your views to send JSON to the front end. You understand? So ideally, I'm supposed to set up a database, but I won't yet till the next class. So I'll try and use this as our to-do. So 1, cook food. 2, eat food. Okay, so let me just make this to do, because this is what the guy will give us, Serializer will give us anyways. So let's assume it has given it to us like this. That is, that's converted our model, to-do model, to something like this. So now let's serve this on the front end. So let's assume we are done writing the code for this. So after we are done, you go to the URLs and then you put it here. That's okay. This path, let me serve all my to-do list class. Then you call this as view method so that Django can serve this guy right here as view. So if I go to my to-do URL now, of course, nothing is happening here. So let me just say return to-do. You can, so I think, okay, let me just use, maybe we're using a lot of classes. Let me use to-do list. Let me use function this time around. To-do lists. So in function, we have API decorators that we can use to work with Django REST framework. I honestly don't know if I should go into that or if that's the best way to introduce us to Django REST framework. But yeah, let's just stick to classes. I really hope we all have like a strong experience with classes and objects and OOP in Python, because it's very important for you to know that if you want to excel in Django. Because ideally, like basically, Django is OOP. Everything in Django is OOP. Starting from the models, you can see we are inheriting from this class, models.model, we are doing this. Then to the admin, to the views and URLs, like everything is inheritance everywhere. So this API view is also inherited from the REST framework so that we can be able to serve items to the front end. You understand? So I think to just let's just move on and assume that we have a function here that returns stuff to the front end. Of course, itself, the request, and yeah, let's just see ads and quacks in case there are any other stuff that needs to be returned. Then from the Django REST framework, we have the response object that we can also import, because now we are dealing with JSON response. So Django REST framework provides us a response class that we can use to return stuff to the front end, or the import. So then we return that response. So that response class accepts what you want to return to the front end. And what do you want to return to the front end? You want to return this JSON. So now if I go to that URL, which is this to do, I should see this JSON. Honestly, DRF is pretty interesting, but it's not to do I used to do here. So URLs to do. Let's leave that there. Now this should not be the issue, but let's see. So now we have the Django, or like repeating what we have here, or to do list, this class. That's what is being repeated. But this is a list. It should return everything to us. But so that's another thing I wanted to talk about. Like Django REST framework has this browsable like UI. Let me use get. Looks like list is not working because it's on the, I don't know. Let me use get. Oh, cool. So get is working. So Django REST framework ships with this UI where you can be able to interact with your API. You can see it as JSON. If I click on JSON, you see what I meant by JSON. This is how JSON looks like. So this is what the front-end guy or the mobile application guy will now use to display whatever you can see on your website or on any application you're using. So just to recap, ideally when we are working with Django, the usual way we use views, def, do something. Then we listen to our requests from the URLs. Then you can have like a decorator of the route you want to match, or if you have like a particular ID you want to match, you can also do it here. Then you do your calculation. When I make calculation, you write your script and everything. You have your context, and then you render something to the front end where you put your HTML, and then you pass it to your context. So this is the usual way you do to Django. But with Django REST framework, we are not sending stuff to Django this time. Like we are not still within Django. We are now going to the outside world. That is someone from like another country is trying to use our application, and of course the person will need to interact with the API. So the entry point is still the URLs, which starts from here, the main Django URL. This can be anything. If I name this my to-do list, this can be anything you want to name it. This is the top level URL. If I request for this not to be page not found because it's not to-do list, you can see it's not working. So this can be anything. You can even have API version 1, you can version it, you can do anything you want to do here. Then you use this include function to provide the location to where Django will see all the URLs that belongs to the app, to this app. So if you go to these URLs in this to-do list, it was not there by default when we created the app. If you can remember, we had to create it ourselves, which is as easy as just creating a new file and then calling it serializer.py. So inside this app now, the same thing, we import paths from Django.urls, and then we provide the path that we want this API to match. So this can also be anything, but this slash means the base path. If I call this item, if I go to this route, it won't work because it's not matching. It shouldn't match anything actually. It shouldn't work. Yeah, it shouldn't work. But it's going to tell me that this is the route that it can find in your application. So you have to go to to-do list / item before, let me put this here. Yeah. Before you can see what you are looking for, as you can see here. So this is the same thing as to-do list, which is what we have here. So now we'll come here and see to-do list. Okay, it has matched. Assuming I type admin, it will match this one. I'll not bother by this one. But it can match to-do list, so it will come here and then go inside this URLs file and see what it can match. Oh, item is here. And I'm searching for item to match it. And then after it has seen a route that it has matched, then it's now goes to the view of that route. This is not necessarily compulsory, but it's also good in case you want to tag your applications. But the next thing that Django does is to go to this. And where is this coming from? From our views. Everything is usually in the views anyways. All the heavy lifting and everything is usually in the views. So when you go to your views now, then you define everything you want to define. So this view is using what is from REST framework, which is the API view. It's like the base class, even from the name, API views. You can see it's a view for creating API. So it's a class. So we have a class of all to-do list. Then we inherit that API view class. That's the inheritance in OOP. That means you have access to all the methods of this class now. And one of the methods of this class is get. It has a lot of methods. It has post, which is the same as doing this def post. So as me, I'm sending a post request from here to work as well. To be handled by this function. It has put. You know those verbs that we discussed. It has everything. It has get, post, put, it has delete. But you know, for the sake of example, we just want to get all our to-do list. So ideally, this is supposed to come from a serializer, which I explained earlier. Is this guy that interfaces with the database. So what this one does is just to convert your DB to JSON. So I just modeled this here. That okay, after this guy has done the conversion, and the reason why I don't want to go into this is because we have not set up our database. So we're going to be doing that in the next class. We're going to set up Postgres or even SQLite, so we can be able to store this data interactively. But whenever you have data in your database, which is handled by models, it is this guy right here that turns to JSON. And where did we get this guy from? Again, from REST framework .serializers. So that's their work. Serializers convert Python objects to JSON. And it has a lot of features as well. It can do validation. Even right here, you can validate that what is coming from the front end is a valid ID, it's a valid item, you can clean, you can do all sorts of things right here. So let's assume this has been sent to the views, because this guy has a lot of methods, that's a lot of attributes, and one of them is permission classes actually. Another one is pagination. Another one is Serializer Class. So what is our attribute that you just provide this guy? So ideally, we are supposed to provide this guy the class that we created here, which is to do serializer. That okay guy, the class that we're using to convert our Python or database model to JSON is this guy right here, serializer. And then we do anything we want to do here. So we can always get by using self.get Serializer class. You can always access it and do all sort of manipulations actually right here. For the sake of simplicity, let's assume you already have an object here as this dictionary. And then we want to send it back to the front end now. So we have to import response from this guy right here. And then we say, okay, when you come to this class and you hit this function, which is the get request, the HTTP verb get, it's also right here as you can see. You can see get. So let me return this to the front end guy. That okay, these are my to-do list. And that's basically what is happening right here. So that's why if we hit this endpoint and I reload it, you can see our to-do list. So assuming you are working with JavaScript or you are working with React, this is what you get back from the backend, and this is what you not display on your JavaScript application or your React application. Just some practical stuff. Let me check LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and you inspect LinkedIn, what is actually happening behind under the hood? If you go to network tab, you see different things happening, a lot of requests happening. And you can see the status code. I was mentioning status code the other time that we have 200, we have this 206, we have 302, which is like a permanent redirect. You have a lot of them. See 404 now, not found. So everything is right here. So let's see one that is returning 200 and see if we can see the response. So let me see if anyone has a very nice response so you can see how JSON looks like. Let me reload this feed. Yeah, so this is the feed that LinkedIn is using to display the feed on my this thing. So okay, so LinkedIn is returning their own response as HTML. But I don't think it's from the server. So let's look at something that is coming from the server. Let's see. Yeah, so this is one from the server. Badge count. So LinkedIn is sending this request to their backend that they should query my feed after a particular time. So this is the time in nanoseconds. And then the backend is returning this JSON. So if you notice, notification count here is 3. That's why on my notification we have 3. Invitation count is 1. That's why on my invitation we have 1 here. So this interaction is the way any website, any mobile application asks the backend, which is what we are trying to do here. But in our own case, it is to-do list that, guys, give me the to-do list for this guy on LinkedIn. And then we are going to return JSON that, okay, these are all the to-do list for Emmanuel. And then the front-end guy will now display it and style it with CSS and everything to make it look fine. But seriously, under the hood, what is being sent or being shared between the two are a bunch of JSONs that is just beautified for us to see. If I click on like button now, the front end would send a React request, which is a post request to the backend. You can see the request method is post. Like, let me like this project or let me like this post. Then the backend would save it in the DB that I've liked this post. That's why the next time I come here, it will show that it has been liked. So I want you to be able to like it again. And of course, these guys are always tracking us, always trying to see how we are using their platform, tracking different stuff we are doing on their because different metrics. So they are all still JSON. So these are all JSONs. So as a backend, this is what I do a lot. If I go to any website, I've done that for Twitter, even with Check Spatial Node itself. Any websites you go to, just right click and inspect it. You would see what's happening under the hood. Then go to the network tab. You'll see where the API's requests are happening. Everything you'll see it. You see the gets, the status, the 200, the post, the everything. When you like a post, when you log in, like everything happens on all websites because that's how they interact. That's how they communicate between the backend and the front end. So that's what this DRF helps us to do, Django REST framework. Instead of the usual way of using templates and using this render, we can remove this render and I'm not rendering anything. You can just import a lot of functions, a lot of classes from the REST framework, which you can all see here. There's a lot of them under API guide. You can see requests, response, views, view sets, a lot of them. To do whatever you want to do, it's still the same Python you're writing anyways. They're just leaning on the already written classes that REST framework has for us, and then we return it back to the front end that, okay, this is your to-do application. And from right here, we can also define status codes. Like if I say status equals to 400, for example, and I reload this. Oh, that should be status, not status code. Let's see. So you can see this is now HTTP 400 batch request. So you can, they are all numbers actually, 200, 400. But I change to 200 and I reload. Notice here now, you now see 200 OK. But of course, it's always a bad request. You won't return it to do again. So, but don't worry, we're gonna do all that later on. How you can conditionally return different status code depending on what the user is requesting from you. So, yeah, I hope this is it's not too complex. Seriously, I'm just trying to think on the fly how best to explain Django REST framework to us. But it's not avoidable. You can't explain DRF without mentioning serializers and inheritance. And I really hope we all have a background in OP to know how inheritance works and stuff like that. And yeah, I think we can stop here for today and then we can continue in the next class. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So, colleagues, the floor is open. If you have any question, you can type it in the chat. Emmanuel will read them, and he will tackle them one after the other. So, I think we should use just 5 minutes for this session, the Q&A, so that we can end the session. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So, thankfully, we're able to complete what we have on our schedule for today. So tomorrow we just go proper into setting up database. We can't avoid that. And we're going to use Postgres. And I'll be using a lot of times tomorrow, which I hope we are going to be able to follow along. So, yeah, if you have any questions, just ask away and can treat it together. Let me just drop this on the chat. I'll drop this on the chat so we can access it easily.
Sure, they are reserving their questions for the practical session. So, yeah, I think we can end the session this evening. Emmanuel, please, is there any other thing that you would like to put across before we end the session? Since there are no questions.
Yeah, so not to sugarcoat it, Django REST framework is easy, but we are going to be doing a lot of classes. That's Python classes, functions, methods, extension. So there's no way we can avoid it. Even if I try to especially not touch some, but I still ended up using them because we can't just shy away from it. So I think one of the advice is if you are not probably strong with OOP, or if you've it's been a long time you used OOP, you can just like revisit it because when we start looking into models, is OOP we are actually writing. Um, like the REST framework is basically OOP because the REST framework is a library. So for us to use the function and classes it has, we need to inherit it. And a lot of ways to customize it. For example, the way I customize the REST framework, the API for Spatial is different from the official REST framework. I can write everything from scratch majorly. So I could be able to undo and do some internal business logic. So it's still pure Python anyways, but since it's Python, so there's always flexibility. Like there's always flexibility in the way you write your code. But to be honest, we can't shy away from OOP, and I really hope we strengthen our OOP. Of course, during the course of the session as well, try as much as possible to also explain some concepts, just like to refresh our minds of what OOP is, inheritance, and stuff like that. But it's pretty easy anyways. Once you get an hang of it, it's very easy. It's usually like it's the same, it doesn't change. You create a Django REST framework project, the next thing you create is the URLs, the next is the serializers, and then the rest is the same. So it's not like it's something that changes. So if you can get a concept, you can spin up any API. Like any API that you might want to do. Yeah, so yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for the knowledge exchange. And I hope we've all learned something this evening. I think this is just like a warm-up session for what he's going to teach on Monday. Yeah, so when we post the videos, we can just go over the videos to try and understand all that he mentioned, so that on Monday when we start the practicals, yeah, it wouldn't be like something new. That I know some of us are on the call, we are already used to Django framework. Some also are on the call who are very new to this whole object-oriented programming and Python, the class-based. Emmanuel kept mentioning class-based function. And I hope you can also go the extra mile to read around that. And as I kept mentioning, it's a mentorship program. We are touching based on all the aspects to show you where to get the right resources. Yeah, so it's up to you to also build upon the little or like whatever we are going to teach you. Then you can revert back to us when you get stuck anywhere. All right. So keep practicing, and let's meet, God willing, Monday. Yeah. And Emmanuel is going to take us continue with this session. All right. Stay blessed and have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning. All right. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye, guys.